Graduating is exciting, but figuring out what comes next, that can feel overwhelming. Whether you're still in college, getting ready to graduate, or recently finished your degree and trying to land that first real role, you're not alone. Maybe your resume isn't where you want it to be. LinkedIn feels a little confusing, and everyone keeps asking, what's your plan? That's exactly why this podcast exists. Welcome to SharpHR Real Talk, Careers After College. I'm Karen Sharp-Price, founder of SharpHR Career Coaching. Real questions, real strategies. Let's figure this out together. Hi, everyone. Graduation doesn't mean everything suddenly makes sense, and that's why I'm excited to welcome our guest. Join us today is Sophia Call, a SUNY Geneseo graduate from 2021. She's here to share what her college years were really like and what the transition after graduation has taught her. Welcome, Sophia. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Karen. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you're here to talk to us about your experiences. So you graduated from Geneseo. What was your major when you started?
So I originally started in 2017 as a business major, and spoiler alert, that did not last very long.
So from high school, you went into Geneseo thinking business was going to be your thing.
Yes, ma'am. I was not entirely sure what I wanted to do, but I've always been a little bit more organizationally minded, so I figured that business would be a good overhead. And it turns out that that was not exactly the quite fit for me.
At what point in those 4 years did you say, uh-oh, no, this is not what I want?
So I think that there's a lot of shame around changing majors, but full transparency, I flunked out of the business school my first year of college. It was end of freshman year. And of course, at that point, I really needed to make a pivotal decision. I knew that there were a lot of things in business that made sense to me, but I also knew that I would probably never pass accounting. And so I pivoted the beginning of my sophomore year into the communications major, which is a lot more people focused and still organizationally minded, but with a little bit less math. And the story is that that's what it
Oh,
is from there.
okay. So when you were in college and you've figured it out after your first year, and that is so common, more students that are in college, sometimes they think they know what they want when they start, and then they pivot to something else at some point during those 4 years. Others get into college not knowing what they want to do, and they still change different majors during that time. So the old way of looking at it was you sort of had to know because you just needed to know what you were doing. The new way is college is a time to explore and to figure it out. And until you take those courses, you really don't know. When I started, I had no idea what I wanted until my junior year. And I took an HR course. Back then it was personnel. And all of a sudden I knew that this is what I wanted to do. But if I had not taken that class, I really don't know what I would be doing today. So time to, explore. When you were in college then and in communications, at what point did you start doing like internships or even thinking about networking?
So I actually started internships in high school. I was very, very blessed. My father is an extremely hard worker. And he worked his way up from manual labor all the way up to the CEO of a construction company. So summers were always spent in his office. So I actually got to start a little bit ahead of the pack in high school, but I did continue every single summer throughout college. My first summer, I worked for the college as an intern, helping with organizational management in the events department. And kind of continued from there, to be honest with you. A lot of the internship opportunities that I had, I was very blessed to have made connections through my high school internships, both at that construction company and elsewhere. So I was very blessed to not have to go very far to find them.
That's great. And so that's kind of how you got on the business path because you were doing those internships earlier on. When you were doing internships within college and they were more focused, I guess, in communication, did you notice a difference in how you felt compared to the internships that you were doing in the business world to understand that I do think that I'm on the right path at this point?
Absolutely. I think that there's a very odd misconception when it comes to getting a business degree or an MBA. I think that those are fabulous things and wonderful goals if that's what makes sense for you. But trying to make myself fit into that box when I knew that there were lots of things in the business school that I would excel at. For example, I took business law as a business student and loved it, where a lot of other people that might not be their strength. I think that it was the acceptance that just because I didn't fit in that box didn't mean that I could not be a good business person. In order to conduct business, you don't have to be a business major.
And the communication piece could be a very important piece because you're interacting with people all the time in any type of business setting that you're in. So when you did graduate, how was it for you when you actually initially graduated trying to find a career opportunity?
So it was definitely harder in some areas and easier in others. I did have the distinct disadvantage of graduating in the wake of COVID, obviously in
Mhm.
2021. So I didn't even have a normal graduation, which is okay. I was very blessed to actually find an opportunity that started, I think, a month or two before I actually graduated. It was remote because the world was still in tatters. But I got my very first position online working for a commonly known healthcare agency in their HR department, I believe in April before I started the process to graduate.
So how did that opportunity unfold? Like, how did you just start applying to a number of different jobs that seemed interesting? Like, how did you begin to start that process of looking?
So I've always been somebody who has felt as though LinkedIn is really important. And so throughout my high school into college career and past that, I've always considered that a very non-negotiable place to keep updated, as the internet is obviously a very large part of everything we do. And so I was applying to jobs on LinkedIn at that point, and I did find that job relatively quickly. However, in job applications since, I will say that the job market is completely different than it was then.
I'm not even sure where it is at right now, but for this new crop of students coming out. So you started out in HR, more of like an assistant role. How did you get then into that high level executive and agent administration role?
So I started out as the executive assistant to the vice president of human resources for a 20,000 employee corporation, which was quite the mouthful. Um,
Yeah.
but due to the fact that it was remote and I didn't have a direct report to actually like teach me a little bit more about how to do my role, I not only was really lacking the ability to synergize with others, I had no coworkers, but I also had nobody that I could go to try to learn the industry or learn things about the job, especially because being an executive assistant depends on your boss, but it also really depends on the industry. And I didn't know a lot about HR being a communications major. That's a little bit more on the business side. So I decided that that job was not for me, and I put out some feelers to see if I knew anybody in the area. And it happened that I had a connection with somebody who knew of a job that was opening and told me to apply at a different company, a real estate company within Rochester, New York, which is where I was living at the time. And I interviewed for that one, got that job, put in my notice, and that was that.
Wow. Do you think that there were core skills that you gained either from college internships or that first particular job that you had that helped you be a better fit for the real estate industry?
I think, as with a lot of industries now, I think that there is a very large propensity as a young person, whether you're college aged or my age, I'm 26, to feel as though you really need to present a certain way in order to get a role. And I find that the people that I connect with as clients currently, but also when I was in that interview process, is authenticity. I really believe that to be a corporate cookie cutter in a world that teaches you that that's what you should be, is really the first thing that will turn you away, both in the first steps of the interview process, but then also sitting down with somebody and talking about why you'd be a good fit. Because everybody can, regurgitate what they've been taught in their interviewing classes, but to really talk about you as a person and what you're looking to build for yourself and the rhythm of life that you're in,
Mhm.
I have found resonates the most with people that want to hire you.
You seem very confident, but very down to earth.
I appreciate that. I think that is my life has been a bit of a dichotomy in that I never knew. I was never one of those children that knew exactly what she wanted to do as a child. I had lots of hobbies, there were things I enjoyed, but I had no clue what I wanted to do when I got to college, hence the wrong major for a second, trying to figure things out. But I have always had a very strong sense of I need to be authentic and I am drawn to people that are. So surrounding myself in industries and with clients and with networking colleagues that are not trying to constantly pitch or sell or make some sort of an ROI statement, but who are really looking to make connections that will serve them fiscally, but also synergetically in the future is like the biggest form of investment that you can possibly make as a young professional.
Yeah, and we are going to talk more about that whole personal branding thing because I think it's super important for people in college or just out of college or that didn't even go to college how to brand themselves when they're looking for work, and it doesn't matter what type of work they're looking for. But let's start back. Like, so you moved from supporting real estate agents to becoming a freelance brand and marketing consultant. So there's got to be a story between that. What made you, one, think about making a pivot in from real estate to your own business? Was there one moment, like an aha moment? Was it a slow turning of your wheels of finding more about what you liked? And how did you go about making that big change early on? Because you're really not that old. So to make that change, it had to be a little bit scary too, the unknown.
It absolutely was. I think that if you can't tell by at this point in the interview, I have always been a very high achiever, and that does not necessarily mean all sunshine and rainbows. It's very hard for me to turn my brain off. And working in a corporate setting, and the two jobs that I did work, and the second one, the one that I got with the real estate firm, did end up becoming an even bigger role that I did love. Working in a role that's 9 to 5 when you consistently want to continue to achieve can really burn you out. And as somebody who loves to work, obviously now that I freelance, that's all that I do. I was realizing that the 9 to 5 schedule really did not make a lot of sense for me because it was so hard for me to figure in time to take a break. I was burning out so quickly. And when you're in a corporate environment like that and you're working with so many different people that need something from you, and you do have, people up the career chain that need things as well outside of your clients, it's very hard to continue to say no when things get added to your plate because you're good at what you do. And so for me, really identifying how I wanted to run my life and settling upon freelance is really how can I reformat my life to fit a rhythm where I'm not burning out because I do my best work at night. And so if I'm in a 9 to 5 and I want to work at night, I have absolutely no time to rest, to recharge. If my body decides to say no, take a break, how many vacation days do I have left? And I realized that at the age of 23, 24, that I was exhausted and I wasn't living the life that I would, in my 30s, 40s, no longer have the ability to live. So that pivot was really, okay, how can I make my work life balance make more sense? Because I don't want to work less hard. I just want to reconfigure when. And so that paired with just a couple different challenges in corporate that I really wasn't getting anywhere with regarding trying to figure out how to work correctly with people that maybe needed a better HR department, trying to solve problems that are bigger than yourself when you are at the bottom of the food chain. There's only so much you can do when you're in that position. And so I figured if I'm going to be making X amount of money and I'm going to be burnt out, I'd rather be burnt out and be able to sleep in and call the shots and take responsibility for everything that I'm doing rather than having to pass it along the food chain or take a sick day when I wake up with a migraine. So it really was that life balance choice because I think I output better work when I'm not burnt out.
So you were an old soul because it can take, it takes most people a lot longer in their life to realize that they sort of go through those motions and are exhausted, but they don't stop and pivot so quickly like you did to recognize what was healthy and what wasn't for yourself. That is a huge thing that you did. So your specialty is fixing brands that feel cluttered or chaotic. Can you give our listeners who are often really building their professional brand right now an example of what that clutter looks like and why does it cause individuals to fail?
Exactly. So looking back on the little chat we had about authenticity and that being super important, and as I'm sure many of your listeners know, we are knee deep in an age where AI is just consistently everywhere, whether that's via audio, via copy, via graphic. It is absolutely everywhere, and there are wonderful things about AI. I use it to organize parts of my life for sure.
Mhm.
But I think that in terms of personal branding, when you are not entirely sure who you are as a person, it shows. It shows in your confidence, not only in being able to sell your product, but in also being able to stand behind your work. And what I mean by that is a lot of young professionals, when they start, I had the ability moving into communications to not be put in as tight of a box as a typical business college professional. But they tell you exactly how to interview and exactly what to wear and exactly how to post on social media and what your resume and your LinkedIn should look like. And a lot of the people listening probably will really resonate to, oh, people won't hire you if they see, or they won't hire you without. And I can honestly say throughout my corporate and freelance experience, it's all bull. That's not applicable at all. The reason why I have found so much success is because when I started freelance, I did some serious soul searching about, okay, who am I? Because if I'm a 1099 freelance service professional, I'm selling a product, but I'm also selling myself and a relationship and an experience. And in order to help somebody figure out their brand, which is my entire job, half of that journey is walking my client through that soul searching identity crisis of, okay, I don't know who I am. And because I don't know, my clients don't know. So they're not resonating with me. They may not trust me or they may not remember me, as opposed to a brand like Nike that everybody knows and trusts because it's there and it's authentic. So I really think that people that are cluttered are often cluttered because they've been told consistently to put themselves into a box, use the same social media templates, have the same resume format, and that's not what gets you somewhere. What gets you somewhere is having somebody sit down after a day of interviews and be like, "Man, I just really loved Sophie because we had the same childhood dog growing up, and I can just tell that, because we had a similar upbringing, we're going to work very efficiently together," as opposed to, oh, this person has 16 credentials and maybe they would be a good fit.
I think establishing what that personal brand is, but then feeling confident about who you are is the other half of it. Because if you do the boilerplate one, you don't feel comfortable. And if you haven't taken the time to really think about who you are and what you like and what your values are and what your goals are and where you want to be, and get that clarity, how can you go out and project it to other people? It has to start from within. So you sort of clear that all up. You get rid of all that clutter and chaos and make it very clear for the person, which then in turn helps build their confidence about who they are and what they do. So when you made this transition, you were going from a salary position where the paycheck was there on a regular basis to a freelance position, which helped with your adaptability and flexibility on some respects, but then on the other, that secure paycheck could have been a problem. Was that the biggest risk that you had to take, or were some other things that you had to also deal with through that process of deciding that you were going to make that big change?
So I had planned on going freelance for a bit before I had started, and the one thing that I've told so many people that ask me about freelance is when to start, and my number one response is start immediately because you'll never feel ready. So I had been putting it off for a bit, and then a change in my career, a sudden one that I wasn't able to predict, had me started a little bit sooner than I had planned on, which honestly I cannot regret at all. I think that it really forced me to trust myself, and that's the biggest piece that you learn when you go out on yourself is if a
Mm.
client is going to trust you not only to deliver a product but to take their money, you have to trust yourself to get the job done as well. So I think not only did it not start the way that I wanted it to or that I had planned, that part was terrifying. But I think also, conversely, I never would have thought that I was ready if I hadn't just gotten forced to jump into the ocean.
Yeah.
So that being said, the fiscal piece was very terrifying for sure. I think that especially as a young professional in today's economy with so many different things changing about freelance law as well, it can be really hard to know if you're making the right choice. I'm very lucky to know a lot of people that have had established businesses for a while that I can call upon to give me good advice. But that doesn't necessarily fill my bank account. So that was really a big piece. But then the other piece, again, with my career shifting from corporate to freelance in a way that I hadn't expected, a lot of it was that reframing, not only in the community and with my reputation, but also within myself, because it hadn't happened the way that I had expected it to. I needed a second to kind of rebrand myself and build that identity for myself before I could really do that for anybody else in order to really feel as though I could rely on myself to sell for me, not just to sell for a client. So some of it not only was fiscal, but some of it was just being able to get myself back out there because that wasn't the way that I had planned to do it, but it was the way the cards fell. So showing up consistently is a really big piece of it, even when you don't want to, or when you're terrified, or when something happens that makes you want to cower in a corner. The best advice I can give for that piece is continuing to show up because the money does come when you're consistently in the room.
And believing in yourself.
Yes.
I think you always believed in yourself that you could do this. So for recent grads that, may have graduated even last May, to those that are about to graduate in the coming months, what do you think is the very first step that they need to take to just organize and complete their own professional identity so that they're ready to hit the ground running and get themselves out there?
So I'm definitely a charts and whiteboards person. I love to have everything all out on a board. And the best advice that I got from my father when I was in their shoes is write it all down. I think to take a look at the life that you want to live, because that's another box we get pushed in as young people, is you should want a corporate job and a high rise and XYZ paycheck. I don't. I want a farm and enough money to live my life, you know? So some of it is writing down your life goals and not being afraid of if they're what the community thinks they should be. Write down what you want to do with your life and then work backwards to figure out how you should accomplish it because you may find that the box that you're trying to fit yourself in for a paycheck or for a career might not be what you need in order to get what you want, or conversely, maybe you need to work harder. It really depends. But I think without knowing your end goal, it doesn't make a lot of sense to just jump into the career pond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, resilience seems to be a clear theme in your career so far, and eh, there will always be setbacks along the way. But what do you think a young person, or how do you think a young person should handle maybe their first major career misstep? Because they may come out of the gate, they may get a job, and 6 months down the road, they may decide, you know what, this is not really what I want to do. How, where does that resilience come from? Where do you tap into it?
I think it's being able to separate, and I still struggle with this. It's being able to separate the personal from the professional. And what I mean by that is when you send an empty spreadsheet to the entire office roster on accident, that's a professional issue. It's not a personal one. It doesn't reflect on your worth as a person or how talented you are. It reflects on the visibility that you have being at the bottom of the food chain. And that's okay. Everybody was there at some point. Your boss was there at some point, even if they don't talk as though they were. I think it's important to separate the professional from the personal because the professional and the personal are always growing, but always separate. And I
Mhm.
think that if you allow one to destroy the other, which is what I was allowing to happen to my mental state, is allowing my burnt out to affect my ability to enjoy my personal life, being able to separate the two of those will take you so far. And that is what really builds the resilience is knowing when to put your dukes up and have a fight and when to sit down, reflect, and realize that, hey, I'm just really tired and I've had a hard day and everybody screws up.
And that is really important that everybody is going to make mistakes. And
Mhm.
whether you're in your career in the first 6 months or the first 16 years, things happen and everybody makes mistakes. I do think, though, one of the things that I've learned along the way is just admit it. I think that's some of the times the hardest thing to do is to admit it because you don't want to be the new kid on the block that just made a mistake. But I think what other people see when you do admit it is your character. And I think that will go a long, long way for that. So, as hard as it is sometimes to say, yeah, that was me, it really has a profound impact on your career. And you just feel better about it. You take ownership of it. For a college student graduating in May, what do you think is the single most important piece of advice that you have for them right now? Maybe not about their resume or their LinkedIn, but about the mindset that they need to succeed in today's job market, which, is ever changing. So that's the hard part right now is sometimes we sort of have an inkling of what that job market is going to be. We can't right now know what it's going to be like in May, but what do you think about, their mindset as they're getting ready to finish up their last semester and about to graduate?
Don't be afraid or ashamed to pivot. It does not make you less of a person. It does not mean that you failed at your original goal. The ability to pivot is an insanely great skill, and it is not something that you should be ashamed of having to do. You should be proud that you have the ability to do so, whether that's within your major or that is within your career path or within your personal life. The ability to take things as they come and to continue to make things work. If you had told little college Sophie about to join corporate who thought that she needed to shoehorn herself into a corporate 9 to 5 until she retired, that she would be running her own business without a guaranteed paycheck at 26, she would have laughed at you. Because the number one thing that I have struggled with is sticking to a plan and being terrified when the plan changes. Do not be afraid to pivot. Just trust yourself. You will end up where you're supposed to be, and likely that pivot will make you better.
I think that's sound advice. I really do.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for taking the time out today to talk with me. This has been great. And I'm sure that there are a number of students out there who are about to graduate or who have already graduated, who are sort of feeling a little bit of, being stuck, will really be able to relate to your story. Thank you so much for being here.
I am so glad. Thank you so much, Karen.
If you like these types of stories, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. Let's be kind out there. It starts with you and I. Have a great day.